software. Okay.
Hi. I think you can start now. Okay. Great. Well, welcome everyone. It's a bit of a strange format. I'm Nathan Sterseitzma. I'm coming to you from Atlanta today. I teach at Emory University here, and I'm happy to be joining Michelle Opona-Pofo and Henry Kerry Kweku, and hopefully me, Aikwe Parks, will also be joining the conversation at some point. So it's a conversation about poetry today. Kweku has just published a chapbook, Revolution of the Scavengers, with Akashic Books, part of the New Generation African Poets project that Kwame Dawes and Chris Vani edit. And Michelle graduated earlier this year with a degree in creative writing and health from Emory, and has been working as a poet for some time. And Nee has just published a new collection. So we're here, I guess, to celebrate the work of poets and to talk about how our poets came to their art and their thoughts about the scene today. So Michelle, maybe, well, I could start with you, and curious how poetry found you, or how you found your way to poetry, and what you've been writing, thinking about lately.
Oh, sure. I think the first time I wrote a poem, I was 12 years old, and it was really just this sort of visual cue that I got. I don't know if you know what gutters look like, but there was a gutter next to my house, and people put trash in it, and they burned it over there. And so created this visual of a smoking gutter. And that, I think, was my first political poem, because I was 12 and very much, I would say, angry with the world and what I perceived to be injustice. And I thought that would be a great way to start, a great form to put it in. So I saw this smoking gutter, smoke coming out of the gutter. That was my first poem that I wrote. That would be the first question. What was the second question?
Well, Nee, great to see you. A little bit frozen, but hopefully the technology cooperates here. So we're just talking about how poetry found you, or how you found your way to poetry. Maybe we'll go to Kweku and then Nee. I'll follow up with more questions.
Okay, so I think with poetry, I started with children's rhymes in school and at home because my dad is also a teacher, and he used to teach us some rhymes, and maybe in those days we used to call them poems. So there were children's rhymes at home, and when you get back to school, you still do it. So I think that's the first introduction to poetry in my life, and then later on, when I went to, I think, senior high school, through the efforts of a friend of mine who is even in this room now. So I think, yeah, that's how I came to poetry.
Nee, welcome. I know you've been writing for a long time and doing it as a living for a long time. So I don't, maybe it's I don't know if you're interested in thinking back to how poetry found you in the first place. But the next thing I'd be curious for us to talk about is, what you're writing these days, why poetry or writing more generally might matter in this current moment.
I think, well, the answers to the two questions are probably similar. I think poetry first came to me in my language. I think Ghana is a very poetic language, and just the habit of myself, my older brother, of translating stuff from Guy to English and back and forth, we found lots of poetry that, as a practice, probably poetry came from one of the methods my father wanted me to use to manage my temper. I had a very bad temper. People find that very hard to believe now when I tell them, but I had a really terrible temper. And so my father encouraged me to, when I wanted to hit someone, count to 10. But I found that I enjoy writing people into tadpoles and frogs. So that I think in a time of advances, right? Poetry is one of the ways in which we explore the world. And it gets abstractions, find words for things that there are no words for. These new experiences that you can't figure out in school. That's part of our response is to create. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm wondering if I have an 8-year-old son, I'm wondering if I should try to give him this poetry assignment to help with the temper sometimes.
It just might help.
Yeah, thanks for that. So yeah, Michelle, quick, what have you been writing lately, or how do you think poetry is speaking to our moment today?
I'm sure I can go ahead and speak on that. I think that for me, when I started writing, I was modeling it more over these protest poems that I've seen subconsciously and consciously in my childhood. But as I grew, I turned more to lyric poems and more of using the personal to get to the political. And so I think that's one thing that I've noticed with poets that I read from the 20th century, 21st to the 21st century, maybe the shift towards lyric poems. And of course, African poets were always writing lyric poems, which approaches in the 60s and things like that. But I think that because they were, and also the poets were like politicians as well. And so this self-assuredness that came with it to tackle this problem. And now we are in the 21st century, and we know things like human rights and genocide that goes on is wrong. So it's not a question of questioning that. It's more of a question of questioning ourselves and where we belong in this movement. And I think that's one of the things that I noticed so far in terms of what I've been writing, what I've been thinking about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think I agree with Michelle a lot with most of the points that she has raised, in the sense that I also started writing, mimicking people like Sapon Kuma, Abeku, and then these are people that also were writing after the styles of Kofi Awono and the other great Ghanaian poets that we have known. And so it feels like a lineage with all of these people. So like the last time that Nathan and I had a chat, Nathan mentioned that what he liked about the book was the kind of the way I'm speaking with Kofi Awono and I'm speaking with one of the Kobolo. Because it feels like all of these people have been poetic in our societies in one way or the other. So that is one of the ways that I'm looking at this. And so yeah, so that's what I can say about that. Yeah.
Awesome. I wonder if each of you would be willing to share a poem with us. I think it's great to actually get some poetry in the air. And Lee, congratulations on the publication of your new collection. I understand it's just a couple of days old, right? So yeah, would each of you be willing to share a poem with us?
I mean, sure. I'd be willing to share something.
Oh, I think, sorry, I think Mia is also speaking, but maybe muted.
No, muted. I'm just saying that, I just arrived, so I will allow the people who joined you earlier to share their beautiful work so that I can listen and, yeah.
Okay, yes, I'd be willing to share, something that I recently wrote last week. It was more, it's just, pulling this up, it was me thinking about how the problems that we think that we're facing now are also problems that, past generations faced, and how sometimes that can be a little bit overwhelming to see that and think of, in terms of progress, how we are facing the same problems, and it's not really a new problem. It's a letter to my grandmother. Dear Grandma, I do my best. We are in times of muddy ground. When I see a woman circle her hand around the wrist of her child and pull him through traffic, his oversized school bag bobbing like the neck of a bird picking at carpets, I think of you when you chewed my food for me, the meat too tough for my teeth. You would perch your head in your small palms and watch me do my best. Today, you watch me tell of whispers of missing of dead friends, bloody machetes, beautiful golden bullet casings, gorgeous bronze funeral caskets, in which we carry a hurt that doesn't seem to die. I tell you, we do our best in these times. You show me your finger bent from the year of famine, saying how something snapped and never mended. You show me centimeters long, faded scars, each for a friend left broken. You show me your cracked tooth from when you stumbled as you ran barefoot in the night from one hospital to another, and some police stations in between, after your husband was shot and you were looking for help. Each time you tell me you did your best, your neck growing longer with each burden of not turning around. I know there was a time we watched vultures make circles, and I foolishly said vultures live long because of their stupidity in eating trash. Death, you said, is also the reason why vultures live long.
Wow, thank you.
Thank you. I wrote that last week, and I'm still working on it, but I thought it was really poignant to the point of feeling a little bit down when you think of these recurring moments that we seem to be having, and how we realize that the thing you're fighting is also the thing that your grandmother, your mother experienced, and probably also the children, the nephew will experience. And also the guilt that they also carry with that, because times were different, I would say. And things we're able to do now, they weren't able to do, or the things that we're doing now, they didn't do. So.
Quickly, do you want to try to follow that up? Please share everything.
I can pull up with this, but I like the poem in the sense that I think it has something to do also with the poem that I decided to read today in case there was a chance to read a poem. So, okay, I'll read this poem. And the title is Ghana, where the spelling is Gaana. Ghana. He pointed a rifle at the throat of Eric Ofosu. He shot without hesitation. Eyewitness on the murdering of Eric Ofosu. I want to get a pet one day, a cat, maybe, or a dog, and name it after my country. So each poem I write for it is also for my country. I want a messy pet, a beautiful pet, a pet that is a metaphor for my country. That when I say my pet tore my life apart, I also mean my country tore my life apart. When I say my pet is beautiful, I also am saying my country is beautiful. When it steals my fish, I say what I say. When it brings me fish, I know there's a bargain. Something taken, something I won't know of. When it breaks my heart, I know it is my country and I cannot unlove it. When it kills me, I won't know. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Nia, could we persuade you to share a poem as well? I would love to hear a little more about your new collection too, for folks who haven't been able to get their hands on it yet.
Called The Gaze. Yeah, it's 4 sections. Section beginning with a letter from the top. So there's game, eros, which is water in French, but sounds like oh, like gossip. And then death. And yeah, it's the session is playing with form and also writing about actual sports games. Eros is self-explanatory. Always it's about how water can move anywhere, and so you can say anything. So the poems over there kind of move you subject a lot more. Okay. Is the whole poems are just definitely contemporary culture. So there's the moves and the things to do with the moonwalk and like the film and how annoying I find it. So yeah, just the map, you know, from the back alone, I can figure it. So. Yeah, so it's not like really good. I will read the first poem from the post section. It's called Osmura Nijipra, which is dark and it's word. 1. 3 primary colors mixed in the shallow of darkness beyond the reach of the scorpions. I have yet to meet the being who can mix me. Brushes tongue. But venom's cure comes from fangs in like a fountain engineered. It's collected and hollow, injected by hydro. I say I am a dreamer who spaces with wild jupiters. And big diamonds in the charcoal of steps, laughter and immersive movement. But God, who knew the power that children have to expand it, to set shit and dream. Rushlight is bearer. Upper at night. Sea or sky. The body knows how swallows it whole. But when? Where am I? I go to bed thinking that there is so much space in the world. Where are the body legs to kick? The questions are punctuate black like stars. Long to fill canvas with textures of night, without hints of blue, streaks of yellow, the balance of its men and women. One day I'm active at the poem acting, sketching acres, because words are so strong. That's what I do. They skin down my daughter, dimple like myself. I'm trying to fill the space, looking at my page, with line 8 of Ruby. If the scenes are painted again, the ginge sail rippling gently with air, the vessel silhouetted, the sun as high and steep. What is believed is higher. Even with what it knows now, the thing to come. Its last 3 incidents, my flesh would still enter the death, swallowed by its move, till the body again moves.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So many directions we could go. I think one, I guess I'll abuse my power as moderator to say one of the things that I'd love to hear your thoughts about is the publishing scene for poetry today. I guess both Michelle and Kwaku are sort of, starting out as poets in the publishing world, and Nadine has a lot of experience, working with, when you co-founded Flipdye Publishing, right? And I know you also, as poets, it's not just about the page, but also about performing your work. So what are you finding exciting about the scene today? What kinds of, opportunities, movements are you seeing that seem like promising developments? And what sorts of challenges do you think, still need to be worked on, or things that you wish were available for poets?
I thought our greater visibility for poets from Africa book fund has been a really great thing. It didn't exist, and it was very difficult because the fact of the matter is, in a lot of other countries, the publishing is directed towards educational books, right? Textbooks. People not really, but they do sometimes they're not editing. I know I'm an editor, but the fact of the matter is that someone can be made or broken by how good an editor they get. And this is not the kind of editor that says you need to do this, you need to do that. The editor is questioning voice that makes the writer have to respond and defend their work, and so doing understand their work better. So they become better writers when they have to edit. Just the same way that it's informed by push somebody to develop an idea into a more refined thing because it has to try its informed message. And so excited about these things, I'm excited about the greater visibility, also partly because of the things like of writers from the continent, and therefore with that comes more awareness of our realities and philosophies and the cultural contribution that we have to the world, which hopefully should make things easier for poets to organize ourselves. There are more magazines, that means that there are more magazines that are online that are actually editing the content. So you have less people judging you on quality just because they don't say your work is bad quality because they don't understand the culture, right? Which is a big thing. So all of those things are wonderful movement. I mean, I retain some cynicism, and I kind of wait to see what happens because I know there was also a period in the 60s where there was the drums and there's so many journals that were being run from well, there's not one even one, it's just a different thing. And there was great movement. People like Kofi Amona and the Nigerian counterpart, they were close friends and shared a lot, what is Shoyinka and go to a school guy's house, right? That type of thing that we feel would now do it for the first time has happened. And so I look at these developments with joy, but with a little bit of caution as balanced. I guess, that would be a summary. There's no way to speak about it in a condensed form. So I am really excited. I mean, so for instance, the fact that, and this is happening in other art forms too, that people can be in Ghana and get publishing deals outside of Ghana without leaving. I think that's also, but again, it's not like it hasn't happened before, because people forget that Amata was a student in Ghana when he first got published, right? And when African cities existed, actually that was kind of the norm, except that those books were designated as textbooks. So, you have that. Yeah, I mean, it's always joyful looking behind your back with us, It's post-colonial. Yeah, but that would be my response.
Yes. Thanks. Well, and you mentioned the African Poetry Book Fund, which is, Kwaku's chapbook has just come out as part of one of their initiatives. So I wonder, Kwaku, Michelle, from your vantage point, what are you finding exciting about the scene, or what do you think we maybe need to still be cynical about as being, what's it?
Well, it's really excited to see some online forums pop up where they're accepting poetry in local languages, because I remember being young and wanting so badly to read something like that. I thought I could create it, and whenever I tried, I wasn't being able to because I hadn't seen one before. I think the first time I read a fiction in Tree, Suwaria Super, it was written in the 60s, I think. That was the first, and I think since then, the only one I've seen that is a fiction written in a local language. And so it's something that I was interested in, but then I think I kind of gave up on it because I didn't know how to quite do it. You have to, as in poetry, you have to read poetry to write poetry. And I didn't know whether to do it in dirge form, I didn't know how to model that. And I'm now seeing it in the Right Ghana, I think they have one. And there are also other African writers, who decided to later to write their novels or their poetry in their local languages. And I think that's something that I'm really excited to see happening on the scene right now.
Awesome, thanks.
So I think it's a good idea. It's a good feeling now that we are having all of these magazines and journals in Africa and even in Ghana, because now we even have Tamper Press, Right Ghana, as Michelle mentioned. And these are not even the only establishments around that we are working with. We still have CGWS, which is new. But when I even came to poetry, these opportunities were not there. If we're going to submit probably maybe a Nigerian journal, or you'd have to look outside of Africa. But now it feels good that we are having all of these, and these poets are also conversing with themselves. You know, we are talking to our brothers who are in Nigeria, we are talking to people within Ghana, elsewhere, those who are in America. We are having these conversations, and it's this poetry that is bringing all of us together in that way. So I feel like it's a good thing. Yeah.
So it sounds like part of what you're saying is new media possibilities, online publishing are energizing. I mean, I think that there's often a kind of, in the US especially, a sort of suspicion of, poetry is being ruined by Twitter or cell phones. But this also seems like a great opportunity for less dominant languages, for people to connect. Further thoughts about the role of new media today?
Well, I mean, just that it breaks down barriers. I mean, what it evolves into, you'll have to see. But I think the thing you have to remember is that for every writer, the first publication gives them a jolt of confidence. That might take them over a hump where they're kind of questioning themselves into a confidence in their voice. And that's what will allow us to begin to see their artistry. So as ephemeral or insignificant as these things may be, there is that role that they will play regardless. We will see some writers emerge because their first opportunity to an online journal, even if the journal dies two months after they got published. And so I think, we can't forget that. The power of that small thing, that seemingly small thing, and how it transforms the creative output for people, and therefore the landscape of literature that we get to experience in this time.
Yeah. One initiative that I've noticed that seems really promising is the Africa in Dialogue. I don't know if you all have come across, this online series of interviews with African writers. They're talking to other African writers about, what matters, and putting it out online means there's not a lot of overhead cost. I think a lot of, time and labor from from the founder, Butzelon and others, but yeah, that seems to be one example of possibilities today. So I wonder if there are people in the room there with Quick who, do you have questions for the panel? I want to make sure that we leave space and time for that. Awesome.
No, actually, I was just waving at everybody. Well, it's great to see you all. Thank you very much for joining us today in Accra virtually. Can you all hear? Can you hear us?
There, yes.
Good to see you all. Yeah, so yeah, in terms of comments and questions, perhaps I'd like to ask Michelle, a little bit. I understand you recently completed a dissertation. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I'd like to find out what it was about, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So, in coming to the dissertation, I was thinking a lot of post-colonial literature, and I was in a class with Professor Seitzma, poetry worlds. And it became this thing where I realized that I had lived in a lot of different places, and that also culminated to the way I perceive things. And post-colonial poetry, I would say, was also looking for meaning through locations of where they are and the language that they're speaking, which is the colonizer language, is English, and how they try to mesh that together. So in every location I think that I was in, I found a different aspect of myself, as you were wont to do when you were growing up. So I based it in classic West. I think 10 years of my life, then I moved to Newark, and realizing that me being Black was something that was important. Because when I was in Ghana, that wasn't, nobody was talking about that, didn't seem like an important thing. What mattered was that I was a woman, and that I had to do certain things because I was a woman. And then I come to America and I find out, oh, I'm also Black, and you have to carry yourself a certain way because you're Black. And then the last was in section. The last section was in Paris, where the speaker was writing letters to James Baldwin. James Baldwin also went to France after he became disillusioned with America. And I was the speakers writing to him about how do you write and how do you know what you know to be the truth. Because I think that's the thing that most of my peers and I also face the struggle of knowing that what you're doing is right, and to be assured of that path, and to be straightforward in that manner. I think was something that we struggle with a lot. So the speaker speaks to James Baldwin in the last part, trying to close it all in together. So that was in short what my dissertation was about, being Black, being an American, being Ghanaian, being a woman, and also being Black.
Thanks. That sounds fascinating. I haven't been here since the beginning of the session, so you might have talked more about this, and I missed it. So pardon me if I'm asking anything that wasn't already covered. But you talked about first being a woman in a society where that was an issue, and then being Black in a society where you're a minority. So this is a double whammy, as the British would say. Are you navigating those minority spaces in your poetry?
I'm sorry, what's the last part?
Are you navigating those minority spaces through your writing?
Yes, I would say that the speaker is definitely on a journey to try and find out which parts to take. Because advice is advice. You can listen to advice all you want all day, but at some point you're going to have to pick. And I think that was even a personal struggle for me when I was writing the script. My dissertation, one of the members under my dissertation work was saying, Michelle, you have to pick, because I was trying to do 3 different forms in one poem, and that doesn't work. So then I was trying to be the master of the poem, but then I had to be humble and let the poem teach me, then I realized that I'm still in the process of these things. And that, I think, is also a reason why sometimes I'm a little late to things to start to write, because you want it to be perfect. You want to know where you're going to end up. And I had it mapped out, kind of wanted it to end, and it didn't end that way because I'm still learning. So I think I navigated in my dissertation, and I'm still navigating, I would say.
And the final section of Bouchel's poetry dissertation was in prose poems. The Paris section, really beautiful prose poems. Quick's chapbook is also largely in prose poems, and he's been speaking of formal experimentation and games in his new work. So I wonder if we in the space, also happy to hear more questions from the room, but maybe something else we could talk about is how you navigate form in your work, or why you feel drawn, to prose poetry and to other particular forms.
Okay, so when I was writing the book, that was the time that I was also exploring prose poems. I was reading Claudia Rankine, and I think she was one of the people that I really admired when it comes to prose poetry and then lyric essays, as well as Hanif Abdurraqib. And I think these people, for some reason, influenced me a lot when I was writing that book. And I think, although K. Suleiman isn't a poet, known as a poet, he is a poet, but not known as a poet. He's known mostly for his prose. I had read his Heavy at that time, and the rawness of the language, the honesty, was also something that I was drawn to. So I think it was a mix of all of these things that helped me to arrive at that end. Yeah.
And is what you're writing now also in prose, or are there other forms that you kind of feel drawn to in this moment?
Yeah, mostly, now I'm writing in prose poetry, but I write other forms too, sometimes. But I mean, that's like minor. I just do most of prose ones now, because I think what I'm doing now has a lot of things to do with storytelling. In the interview, I mentioned that I was also working on this collection that is a three-generational conversation between sons. That's myself, my dad, and my granddad. And I feel like these are stories. Currently, I'm exploring prose poetry and then lyric essays with that. But it may end up in another way. I cannot decide what it becomes, but if it continues to be prose poetry, we move with it. Yeah.
So, any other questions or comments from the room?
Okay, well, that's really interesting. I'm wondering whether it's to do with your youth, the two of you, that you are so unbound by form. And Nathan, what would you say to that? I'm not really sure myself. Is this, am I missing something? Is everybody like this, or is it something to do with the fact that they're young and they're experimenting and they're used to new platforms and so on? Maybe Michelle, you'd like to comment on that.
Oh, sure. So I tried to write sonnets. I cannot do it for the life of me. I can do it, but I do not like the results. And I think that Paul sort of mentioned this, that they form the tri-form. And I think that's something that we got from our teachers as well. We learned the forms in school, and we tried to do it, but there are some things that you cannot fathom. You can't form, because if you are so moved to write a poem, why would you put it in a room? You have to have a master, and it's possible. Robert Frost did, but that level of mastery, I'd say, is something that I would have to work towards. To become is a weird thing. So I think that when I didn't even start with the prose poetry. I stumbled into that, I think, the very last part of the last year, because I was still so hung up on the form, and
had to do everything right. I had to do it in a certain particular way because that's how Christopher Cuba did it, that's how J.D. Clark did it, that's how Aimé Césaire did it. And so why would I think I know any better than them? But I think the realization is you're not them. And so you have to move away from them a little bit. And then later, perhaps, you have the wisdom to come back to them and to not try and inhabit their space, but to use their form to make your own home. That's it.
Yeah, that's such a good way of putting it. And maybe we should note that J.P. Clark passed away recently. You know, this kind of giant of Nigerian letters. I don't know what kind of reputation he has, but he's someone who's certainly been influential for many, many years in the Nigerian scene. Yeah. The other questions from the crowd?
Okay, sorry, it's not, nobody else is asking, that's why.
I have more. I can keep going too.
Okay, just one last one. Okay. Well, talking about form, I find that interesting because I actually just did a master's in creative writing this past year, and I did some poetry, but prose was my main thing. In fact, I just workshopped some pieces with my colleagues on the MA, it was a distance MA, and one of the tutors was irked by the fact that I did not pay more attention to form, and so I just actually would like to ask you, Nathan, as a professor of poetry, how much does anybody need to be bound by form? Are we allowed to make up our own rules, or what?
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. I think what I'm always trying to persuade my students of is that form is capacious. Form doesn't just mean a sonnet or iambic pentameter or these kinds of received things. That form is just the way that we shape language, the how. If the themes that you want to convey or the content is the what, there's always a how. And so sometimes that can be prose poems, sometimes it's, free verse all across the page, seemingly straightforward. There's always a form there, and then I guess the question is, how can we be more conscious of the choices that we make in the forms that we're attracted to? Who's just won the Pulitzer Prize for poetry. His most recent collection is The Tradition, which is, in some ways, it's an ironic title. Part of the tradition he's talking about is traditions of violence against Black people in the U.S. In many ways, he's breaking with tradition in terms of talking about sexuality, but he actually invents a new form in that book called the duplex, which is a kind of combination of the blues and the ghazal, this Arabic Persian form, and I think it works very well. But of course, he's also put a lot of years into trying out what works for him, and then I think finding a form that allowed him to say something that existing forms didn't. Yeah, I don't know, Michelle, real quick, could you have other thoughts about like how form or just your craft choices, play a role in your writing?
I would say one form that I'm very comfortable with is the blues form. And I think it's because it allows you to not be, not that it's not serious topics, it's always serious topics, but in the manner in which you deliver it, it's not so serious. So in the blues form, I think it's one form that I'm very comfortable using in both English and in Twi whenever I try to translate some of my work, which is purely by in Twi. That's one thing that I would say about form.
Okay, so I think the last thing that I think I'm going to say about the form is also that for instance, those of us that do not have formal education in creative writing, it is what you're exposed to or what you have learned from elsewhere that sometimes you mimic until you feel confident in it. So if you see a particular writing and then you're interested in that, you keep reading that, you keep writing in that style until you feel like that's what you can do. So, like I said, before I was doing prose writing, I was doing verses, I was writing in verses. Some of them, I don't even know the names of that kind of verse, but I've written it. People see that it's, oh, this is that. But probably I didn't even know that when I was writing it, because I did not have formal education in that. So I think that's one thing too about form when it comes to people without formal education in creative writing. Yeah.
Yeah. You absorb from what you're reading.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I think we're always responding, not necessarily explicitly or consciously, but always responding to the language in our head from what we've read. Why don't I close with one final small question, which is African poetry, useful or not useful as a term?
Well, it can be useful in community building, in a sense that, okay, if we say African poetry, now I feel like my brothers in Nigeria, those in Cameroon, Eastern Africa, elsewhere, they are all we are all conversing. Now we are part of one community. But when it comes to, say, individuality, I don't think it is such a good idea. I'm not so sure. Personally, when I write my bios, I write I am Ghanaian and I'm a poet. I don't say I'm a Ghanaian poet because I don't think I am just for Ghana. Poetry is for everybody. So I don't say I'm a Ghanaian poet. I'm a Ghanaian and I'm a poet. So that's what I think about that. Yeah.
Great.
So we have 5 minutes more though.
I agree that it's very, the term African poets is very useful when we want to do community building. It's a chance to communicate and tell our stories, and then to find out that somebody or other people in Nigeria went through the same thing. You're like, oh, that happened to you too. It's not just us, we're not making it up in our heads. So that's very good. But then, once again, Africa is not a monolith. If a South African writer writes about the HIV/AIDS epidemic, a Ghanaian writer wouldn't be able to approach it the same way. It's something I learned in a health class, how more exposure gives you more nuance to the topic at hand. And the less you know about it, the more conservative you face those challenges. And so those two writers wouldn't be the same thing. But then also it's a matter of pride. Yes, I'm an African writer, and I don't have to even try to be an African writer. If I say I'm an African poet, then these images of what I'm supposed to be talking about suddenly emerge. Then where's the hut? And all those line of questionings that's inevitably going to happen. And that's not what it's about, because anything that I write is going to be Ghanaian, just for the simple fact that I happen to be Ghanaian. And I don't think that it's something that sometimes I shy away from, but also I realize that it's something that I have to embrace, because no male poet ever said, I don't want to be known as a male poet, because it's not a sin to be male. But in some cases, it's a sin to be African. It's a sin to be a woman. And I find that it's nonsense, really. It's absurd. So it's a matter of reclaiming it. Yes, I am all these things. And I will talk about whatever I want to talk about. And whether you think it's an African poem is on you and not on me. You have to read the poem. You have to understand the nuances of people, that they're not single stories. So that's how I think of it. It has many layers, and it's a very complicated question. Obviously, it's as simple as we would hope it to be. But as in all things, there's good and bad.
Yeah. Okay, Nathan, it looks like our time is up.
Okay, thank you so much. It's really great to see you both, and thanks to those of you